What happens when Hollywood royalty walks onto a morning talk show stage expecting respect, only to be blindsided by condescension and accusations that would shatter the illusion of celebrity friendship? In just 39 seconds, what seemed like a routine promotional interview transformed into a firestorm that would expose the ugly truth about entitlement in broadcast television and send one of the most respected actors in cinema history storming off set in a moment that left everyone speechless. The morning started like any other at the Good Morning America studios in Times Square. Denzel Washington had arrived early, his publicist by his side, ready to promote his latest project. This was supposed to be easy. A quick conversation, some laughs, a few clips from the film, and he would be on his way. Denzel had done hundreds of these interviews over the decades. He knew the routine. He knew how to charm an audience. He knew how to make even the most mundane questions sound interesting. But what he did not know was that Michael Strahan had decided this morning would be different. Denzel walked onto the set with his characteristic calm confidence. The studio lights were bright, the cameras were ready, and the audience applauded warmly as he took his seat across from Michael. He smiled, waved, and settled into the chair. Michael greeted him with a big grin, the kind of grin that usually signals an easy, friendly conversation. The two men shook hands. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed fine. But then Michael opened his mouth, and the temperature in the room changed. "So Denzel," Michael began, leaning back in his chair with an air of casual authority, "I gotta ask you something that everyone has been wondering about." Denzel nodded politely. "Sure, go ahead." Michael paused for effect, letting the silence hang in the air for just a moment too long. "You have been in this business for what, 40 years now? And you have played a lot of the same type of characters. The tough guy, the hero, the man with the plan. Do you ever worry that maybe you are just playing yourself over and over again? That maybe people are getting tired of the same old Denzel?" The words landed like a slap across the face. The audience went silent. You could feel the shift in energy. This was not a question. This was an accusation. This was Michael Strahan, a man who had transitioned from football to television, questioning the artistic integrity of one of the greatest actors of all time. Denzel blinked. His smile faded slightly, but he kept his composure. "Well, Michael," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully, "I think every actor brings something different to every role. I do not think I am playing the same character. Each film has its own story, its own challenges, its own truth." Michael waved his hand dismissively, as if Denzel had just said something ridiculous. "Come on, man, let us be real here. You have been coasting on your name for years. People go see your movies because you are Denzel Washington, not because you are doing anything groundbreaking. When was the last time you actually challenged yourself?" The audacity of the statement was stunning. Here was Michael Strahan, a host who read off a teleprompter for a living, telling Denzel Washington, a two-time Academy Award winner, that he was not challenging himself. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Denzel leaned forward slightly. His voice remained calm, but there was a steel underneath it now. "Michael, I do not know what you are trying to get at here, but I have spent my entire career trying to bring truth to every role I play. I have worked with some of the greatest directors in the world. I have told stories that matter. So I am not sure where this is coming from." Michael smirked. It was the kind of smirk that said he thought he was in control, that he thought he was winning. "I am just saying what a lot of people are thinking. You have been in the game a long time. Maybe it is time to step aside and let some younger talent shine. Maybe you are holding on to something that does not belong to you anymore." That was the moment. That was the line that should never have been crossed. Denzel Washington did not get angry easily. He was known for his professionalism, his grace, his ability to handle even the most difficult situations with dignity. But there was a limit, and Michael Strahan had just blown past it. Denzel sat back in his chair. His jaw tightened. He looked at Michael for a long moment, and you could see the wheels turning in his mind. He was deciding whether to respond with words or with action. He chose action. "You know what, Michael?" Denzel said quietly, his voice steady but firm. "I came here to talk about my work. I came here to have a conversation. But I am not going to sit here and let you disrespect me on national television. I have earned my place in this industry. I have put in the work. And I do not need to justify myself to you or anyone else." He stood up. The microphone clipped to his lapel came loose, and he pulled it off without hesitation. The cameras were still rolling. The audience sat frozen, unsure of what to do. This was not in the script. This was not rehearsed. This was real. Michael tried to recover. "Denzel, come on, man. I was just asking a question. Let us keep talking." But Denzel was already walking. He did not storm off in a rage. He did not yell. He simply walked away with the same quiet dignity that had defined his entire career. He moved past the cameras, past the crew, past the stunned producers who were scrambling to figure out what just happened. He was done. Behind him, Michael sat at the desk, his smirk gone, replaced by a look of confusion and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of realization that he had gone too far. But the damage was done. The interview was over, and the fallout was about to begin. The moment Denzel left the stage, the studio erupted into chaos. Producers were shouting into headsets, trying to figure out how to fill the rest of the segment. The audience was murmuring, some people looking shocked, others pulling out their phones to record what they had just witnessed. The cameramen did not know whether to keep filming or cut away. No one knew what to do. Michael sat at the desk, trying to play it cool. He turned to the camera and forced a laugh. "Well, that was unexpected. Denzel Washington, everybody. A true professional." His voice dripped with sarcasm, but it was clear that he was rattled. This was not how the interview was supposed to go. This was not how any interview was supposed to go. What Michael did not understand, what he failed to grasp in that moment, was that he had not just insulted Denzel Washington. He had insulted decades of hard work, sacrifice, and dedication. He had reduced a legendary career to a dismissive comment, as if all of it meant nothing. And Denzel was not going to stand for it. Backstage, Denzel was already in his dressing room, packing up his things. His publicist was on the phone, dealing with the network executives who were now in full panic mode. They wanted him to come back. They wanted him to finish the interview. They wanted to smooth things over. But Denzel was not interested. He had made his point. He had drawn his line, and he was not going to cross back over it. Meanwhile, back on set, Michael tried to move on to the next segment. He introduced a cooking segment with the show's resident chef, but his energy was off. He stumbled over his words. He looked distracted. It was clear that what had just happened was still weighing on him. But instead of acknowledging it, instead of taking responsibility, he tried to act like nothing had happened, like Denzel walking off set was just a minor inconvenience. The producers were already strategizing. They knew this was going to be a story. They knew the clips would be all over social media within minutes. They knew they had to control the narrative. So they started making calls, reaching out to entertainment reporters, trying to spin the story in a way that would not make Michael look like the villain. But it was too late. The damage was done. In the days leading up to this interview, there had been tension brewing behind the scenes. Michael Strahan had been feeling the pressure of his role as a morning show host. The ratings were slipping, the competition was fierce, and he was looking for a way to make a splash, to create a moment that would get people talking. He thought that pushing Denzel, challenging him, would make for great television. He thought it would show that he was not afraid to ask the tough questions. But he miscalculated. He mistook arrogance for courage. And he paid the price. Denzel Washington did not need Good Morning America. He did not need the publicity. He did not need to sit there and be disrespected by someone who had not earned the right to question him. He had built his career on excellence, on choosing roles that mattered, on working with people who respected the craft. And Michael Strahan, in his arrogance, had forgotten that. As the show went to commercial, the studio was still buzzing. The crew members were whispering to each other, trying to process what they had just seen. Some of them had worked on the show for years, and they had never seen anything like this. Guests walked off sets in scripted dramas, sure, but not in real life, not on live television, and certainly not someone like Denzel Washington. One of the camera operators, a woman who had been with the show since its early days, shook her head as she adjusted her equipment. "He went too far," she muttered to a colleague. "Way too far." Her colleague nodded in agreement. Everyone knew it. Everyone felt it. Michael had crossed a line, and there was no going back. Back in the control room, the executive producer was on the phone with the network brass. The conversation was heated. They wanted answers. They wanted to know how this had happened. They wanted to know why no one had stopped Michael before he went too far. But the truth was, no one had expected it. Michael had gone rogue. He had deviated from the pre-approved questions. He had decided, in that moment, that he knew better than everyone else. And now everyone was paying for it. Denzel, meanwhile, was calm. He had been in this business long enough to know that moments like this came and went. He had been through controversies before. He had been misquoted. misunderstood, and misrepresented. But he had always come out on top because he stayed true to himself, and this time would be no different. His publicist knocked on the dressing room door. "They want you to come back," she said softly. "They are saying they will let you say whatever you want. No more questions from Michael, just a statement." Denzel looked at her and shook his head. "I already said everything I needed to say." She nodded, understanding. She had worked with Denzel for years, and she knew when his mind was made up. There was no changing it. He was done with Good Morning America. He was done with Michael Strahan, and he was done playing nice. On set, the show continued. Michael tried to regain his footing, but it was clear that his confidence had taken a hit. He stumbled through the rest of the hour, his usual charm replaced by a forced enthusiasm that fooled no one. The other hosts could sense it too. They exchanged glances, trying to support him, but they knew what had happened. They knew he had messed up. When the show finally ended, Michael walked off set without saying a word to anyone. He went straight to his dressing room and closed the door. Inside, he sat down and stared at the wall. For the first time all day, he was alone with his thoughts, and those thoughts were not kind. He had wanted to make a statement. He had wanted to prove that he was more than just a friendly face reading off a teleprompter. He had wanted to show that he could handle the big interviews, the tough conversations, the moments that mattered. But instead, he had shown the world exactly what he was, someone who did not understand the difference between challenging a guest and disrespecting them. The walk-off was not just about one bad question. It was about the accumulation of everything that led up to that moment. It was about Michael thinking he had the right to talk down to someone who had achieved more in a single film than Michael had in his entire television career. It was about the arrogance of someone who had been handed a platform and mistook it for earned respect. Denzel Washington did not need to defend himself. His work spoke for itself. His legacy was secure. But he also was not going to sit there and let someone belittle him on national television. He had stood up, walked away, and in doing so, he had reminded everyone watching that respect is not given, it is earned. And Michael Strahan had not earned it. As Denzel left the studio and got into his car, he felt no regret. He had done what needed to be done. He had drawn a line, and he had walked away with his dignity intact. That was more than most people could say in situations like this. The driver pulled out into the streets of New York, and Denzel looked out the window at the city rushing by. He thought about all the years he had spent in this business, all the highs and lows, all the moments of triumph and struggle, and he knew that this moment, this walk-off, would be remembered, but it would not define him, because nothing could define Denzel Washington except his work. And that work would continue long after people forgot about Michael Strahan and his misguided attempt at tough journalism. Back at the studio, the fallout was just beginning. The producers were in emergency meetings. The network executives were fielding calls from publicists, agents, and entertainment reporters. Everyone wanted to know what happened. Everyone wanted to know who was to blame. And everyone knew the answer, even if they were not ready to say it out loud yet. Michael Strahan had created a moment, all right, just not the kind he had hoped for. He had created a moment that showed the world exactly what happens when arrogance meets excellence, and excellence always wins. The tension in the studio after Denzel left was thick enough to cut with a knife. The remaining crew members moved quickly and quietly, trying to get through the rest of the broadcast without drawing attention to the disaster that had just unfolded. The makeup artists whispered to each other in the corner. The sound technicians exchanged wide-eyed glances. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something that would be talked about for years. Michael tried to carry on as if everything was normal, but his body language betrayed him. His shoulders were tense. His smile did not reach his eyes. He kept glancing toward the exit where Denzel had walked out, as if expecting him to come back. But Denzel was not coming back. That much was clear. During the commercial breaks, the other hosts tried to lighten the mood. They cracked jokes, tried to laugh it off, but Michael was not having it. He sat at the desk, staring at his notes, not really reading them. His mind was elsewhere. He was replaying the conversation in his head, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. But deep down, he knew. He had started it. He had pushed too hard. He had been disrespectful. And now he was dealing with the consequences. One of the producers finally approached him during a break. "Michael, we need to talk about what just happened," she said, her voice low and serious. Michael waved her off. "Not now. We will deal with it after the show." But the producer was not backing down. "No, Michael, we need to address this now. The network is already getting calls. People are posting videos online. This is blowing up." Michael looked at her, irritation flashing across his face. "What do you want me to do? Go chase him down and apologize?" He overreacted. "I was just asking questions." The producer stared at him, disbelief written all over her face. "You really do not get it, do you? You insulted one of the most respected actors in the world on live television. You questioned his talent, his career, his legacy, and you think he overreacted?" Michael did not respond. He just turned back to his notes, refusing to engage. The producer shook her head and walked away, muttering under her breath. She knew this was going to be a nightmare to clean up, and she knew that Michael was not going to make it any easier. The rest of the show limped to the finish line. When the final segment ended and the cameras cut, the studio erupted into frantic activity. Producers were shouting orders, publicists were fielding calls, and Michael sat at the desk, alone, as the crew packed up around him. He finally stood up and walked toward his dressing room. As he passed by crew members, he noticed the way they avoided eye contact. No one wanted to talk to him. No one wanted to be associated with what had just happened. He was on his own. Inside his dressing room, Michael sat down and pulled out his phone. The notifications were already piling up. Text messages from friends and colleagues, social media alerts, news articles being published in real time. He scrolled through them, his stomach sinking with each headline. The story was everywhere, and it was not painting him in a good light. He read one article that called him arrogant and out of touch. Another described the interview as a masterclass in how not to treat a guest. A third simply said, "Denzel Washington walks off Good Morning America after Michael Strahan disrespects him." The headlines kept coming, each one worse than the last. Michael threw his phone down on the couch. He leaned back and closed his eyes, trying to block it all out. But he could not. The reality of what he had done was setting in. He had not just made a mistake, he had burned a bridge. He had alienated one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, and he had done it in front of millions of people. There was a knock on the door. Michael did not respond at first, hoping whoever it was would just go away. But the knock came again, more insistent this time. He sighed and stood up, walking over to open the door. It was one of the network executives, a man in a suit with a grim expression on his face. "Michael, we need to talk," the executive said, stepping into the room without waiting for an invitation. Michael crossed his arms. "Let me guess, the network is not happy." "That is putting it mildly," the executive said. "Do you have any idea what you just did? Denzel Washington is one of the most beloved actors in the world. He has never walked off an interview before. Never. And you pushed him to the point where he felt he had no choice." Michael shrugged, trying to play it cool. "I was just doing my job, asking tough questions. Is not that what you guys wanted? Something that would get people talking?" The executive stared at him, incredulous. There's a difference between asking tough questions and being disrespectful. You crossed a line, Michael, and now we are all paying for it. Michael did not know what to say. He wanted to defend himself, to argue that he had been misunderstood, that Denzel had overreacted. But deep down, he knew the executive was right. He had messed up, and there was no spinning this into a win. The executive continued, "Look, I do not know what you are thinking, but this is a disaster. We are going to have to do damage control, and you are going to have to be part of it. That means apologizing, publicly, and it better be sincere." Michael clenched his jaw. The last thing he wanted to do was apologize, but he knew he did not have a choice. If he did not play along, the network would hang him out to dry, and his career would be over before he knew it. "Fine," Michael said finally. "I will do it." The executive nodded. "Good. We will set something up for tomorrow. In the meantime, stay off social media. Do not make any statements. Do not talk to anyone. Just lay low until we figure out how to handle this." The executive left, and Michael was alone again. He sat back down on the couch, his head in his hands. He had thought this was going to be his moment, his chance to prove that he was more than just a former athlete turned talk show host. But instead, he had proven the opposite. He had shown that he did not have what it took to hang with the greats. And Denzel Washington had made sure everyone knew it. Meanwhile, Denzel was already moving on. He was back in his hotel room, sitting by the window, looking out at the city. His publicist had called to check in, but he assured her he was fine. And he was. He had been through worse. He had dealt with bigger controversies. This was just another day in the life of someone who refused to compromise his dignity. He thought about Michael Strahan. about the look on his face when Denzel stood up and walked away. He wondered if Michael understood what he had done. He wondered if Michael would learn from this. But ultimately, it did not matter. Denzel had made his point, and that was enough. The next morning, Michael sat in front of a camera, ready to deliver his apology. The network had written a statement for him, and he read it off the teleprompter, his voice flat and rehearsed. He said all the right things. He expressed regret. He acknowledged that he had crossed a line. He praised Denzel for his incredible career and contributions to cinema. But anyone watching could tell that his heart was not in it. He was going through the motions, doing what he had to do to save his job. Denzel did not watch the apology. He did not need to. He had already moved on. He was back to focusing on his work, on the things that mattered. Because at the end of the day, that was all that really counted. Not the drama, not the headlines, just the work. And as the days passed and the story faded from the news cycle, one thing became clear. Michael Strahan had learned a hard lesson. You do not disrespect greatness. You do not question the legacy of someone who has earned every ounce of their success. And you certainly do not do it on live television, expecting to come out on top. Because when you go up against someone like Denzel Washington, you do not win. You just remind the world why they are a legend and why you are not.